In the shadowy corners of biblical history lies a pair of texts whispered about for centuries, the 6th and 7th books of Moses. Unlike Genesis, Exodus, or Psalms, these works never made it into the official Bible. Yet they emerged in Europe in the 18th century as grimoires, manuals of mystical power filled with incantations, seals, and secret knowledge allegedly revealed to Moses by God himself. For the faithful, Moses was the great prophet and lawgiver, but in these forbidden books, he is portrayed as a divine magician, commanding spirits, bending nature, and unlocking mysteries that echoed the powers of ancient gods. What made them so dangerous? These books claim to hold the same supernatural formulas Moses used to part the Red Sea, call down plagues on Egypt, and summon heavenly fire. To church authorities, this was blasphemy. But to those searching for deeper truth, these texts were priceless. They carried echoes of something older, more primal. Something that resonates deeply with African traditions of invoking spiritual powers through chants, names, and sacred symbols. It's no accident that the 6th and 7th books of Moses found their strongest home not in Europe, but in Africa and its diaspora. When enslaved Africans were forced into Christianity, they recognized something familiar in these books, the blending of divine authority with ritual power. Just as Yoruba priests called on Ogun or Shango with iron, fire, and chant, the books of Moses promised mastery of elements through divine seals and secret words. The mystery deepens when we realize that Moses himself was raised in Egypt, the heartland of African spiritual science. Ancient Egyptian priests, masters of ritual and sacred words, would have passed their traditions through the land where Moses grew up. Could it be that the so-called magical power of Moses was actually rooted in African spirituality? Could these forbidden books be the bridge between the Hebrew prophet and the African deities who ruled over nature, fate, and the unseen world? As the pages unfold, the story becomes even more electrifying, Moses not only as a prophet, but as a spiritual warrior whose knowledge mirrors that of Africa's most powerful gods. This is where myth, faith, and hidden history collide. In the 6th and 7th books of Moses, the figure of Moses transcends his role as a simple prophet. He becomes a master magician, wielding powers that go far beyond the biblical miracles we know. These books don't just recount his acts of divine intervention, they provide rituals, seals, and incantations that claim to channel divine power through human hands. Moses is portrayed not just as the chosen one of God, but as a spiritual authority capable of commanding the forces of nature itself. This raises an intriguing question: could Moses' miracles and the powers described in these texts be echoes of ancient African spiritual traditions? Ancient Egypt, where Moses was raised, was home to powerful priesthoods who practiced ritual magic to control the elements. The Book of the Dead, filled with powerful spells and incantations, mirrors many of the techniques found in Moses' grimoires. From invoking the sun god Ra to commanding the river Nile, Egyptian priests were masters of manipulating the natural and supernatural worlds. In the 6th and 7th books of Moses, these same principles seem to echo, as Moses calls on angels, divine seals, and secret words to control the forces of nature. The power of fire, water, and air, all elements central to African spiritual practices, are harnessed by Moses through sacred rituals. This is strikingly similar to African deities like Shango, the Yoruba god of thunder, who commands the power of lightning, and Ogun, the god of iron and war, who wields fire and metal in battle. These deities, just like Moses, are not just symbolic figures but are seen as living forces of nature. Moreover, many of the rituals in the 6th and 7th books of Moses closely parallel those in Afro-diasporic religions such as Hoodoo, Santería, and Vodou, where the use of names, symbols, and incantations is believed to channel divine forces. Just as Moses uses divine names and sacred seals to control the elements, practitioners of these religions invoke the names of spirits or deities to work powerful magic, whether it's for healing, protection, or vengeance. The seals and names of angels in Moses' books are eerily similar to the sacred symbols used in African rituals, further blurring the lines between Moses' divine magic and the spiritual practices of African deities. This raises a chilling question: did Moses' magical powers originate from the same traditions that produced Africa's most powerful gods? Were these powers transformed into the rituals that Moses brought to the Israelites, or did Moses adapt ancient African magic into his own form of spiritual mastery? These books reveal a Moses who was far more than a prophet. He was a spiritual warrior, standing at the crossroads of African ritual and Hebrew prophecy. This powerful magician, armed with divine knowledge, becomes a bridge between two worlds: the world of African gods and the biblical God. The heart of the 6th and 7th books of Moses lies in its hidden power, names, seals, and rituals that unlock the forces of the universe. At the core of these books is a series of sacred names of God, angels, and spirits. These names are not just for invoking divine will, they are seen as keys to the cosmic forces, enabling the practitioner to command nature, spirits, and even the afterlife. Moses becomes a powerful priest who holds the keys to divine communication and spiritual command. In African spiritual traditions, names are not just identifiers, they are believed to embody the essence of a being's power. This is central to the worship of orishas like Shango, god of thunder, or Ogun, god of iron. In many African cultures, invoking the correct name of a deity or spirit is crucial for ensuring the intended forces are called forth. Similarly, in the 6th and 7th books of Moses, sacred names of angels are used to control the forces of nature, such as summoning winds, fire, and water. This directly parallels the practice of invoking spirits and orishas through their names in African traditions. Rituals in these texts are detailed and tied to the cycles of nature. The book outlines the use of divine names in a step-by-step process, rituals that require specific prayers, symbolic actions, and timing. In African traditions, ritual purity and timing are critical to achieving success. Deities like Obeah, goddess of winds and storms, are called upon with specific songs, dances, and offerings, just as Moses uses ritual actions to invoke divine forces. One of the most fascinating parallels lies in the role of divine seals. In Moses' books, seals are inscribed with divine names and used to protect or control the forces they invoke. Similarly, in African occult practices, objects like amulets and ritual markings serve as conduits for spiritual power. The use of symbols, whether in the form of seals or ritual tools, is a common thread between Moses' rituals and African practices. This leads to a compelling realization: Moses' rituals mirror the African mystical traditions in profound ways. Both wield a sacred knowledge that transcends the physical world, commanding the unseen through names, seals, and rituals, tools used to command spirits and forces of nature. Moses becomes not only a prophet but a high priest in the ancient tradition of spiritual mastery, using the same methods practiced across Africa for millennia. The 6th and 7th books of Moses didn't just stay hidden in the ancient world, they found a profound home in the spiritual practices of the African diaspora. In regions such as the Caribbean, South America, and the southern United States, enslaved Africans merged their indigenous beliefs with elements of Christianity. As a result, these secret books were embraced, often blended with African deities and ritual practices in forms like Hoodoo, Santería, Vodou, and Obeah. These traditions, rooted in African cosmology, used the same rituals, seals, and divine names found in Moses' grimoires to channel spiritual power and protect the oppressed. In Hoodoo, for example, practitioners use root work, divination, and magical rituals to invoke spirits and gods. These practices are deeply connected to African traditions that emphasize the manipulation of spiritual forces for protection, healing, and justice. The use of names, spells, and symbols in Hoodoo mirrors that of Moses in the Forbidden Books. Just as Moses used sacred names to control the elements and invoke divine protection, so too do Hoodoo practitioners rely on the power of names, calling on spirits like Papa Legba, the gatekeeper, or Ogun, the warrior god. Moses' rituals of protection and commands over nature resonate deeply in this practice. Santeria, a religion rooted in the Yoruba traditions of West Africa, fuses Catholic saints with orishas like Shango, Ogun, and Yemaya. In Santeria, rituals, prayers, and sacred songs are used to invoke the orishas, just as Moses invoked angels and divine forces in his rituals. The sacred symbols, seals, and divine names in the 6th and 7th books of Moses found their way into Santeria, where they are used to summon spiritual power for guidance, protection, and healing. Here, too, the names and ritual objects become the keys to commanding spiritual forces, connecting Moses' teachings to the ancient African tradition of summoning powerful deities. In Vodou, a religion practiced in Haiti and the Americas, the same principles of invoking deities through sacred names, rituals, and objects are central. The Loa, spirits and deities in Vodou, are called upon in ceremonies with rituals very similar to those in the 6th and 7th books of Moses. Divine seals, much like those in Moses' books, are used to protect or control spiritual forces, and incantations are recited to invoke powerful Loa. Vodou practitioners often work with ancestors and spirits in ways that resemble Moses' connection with divine beings. The cross-cultural use of rituals to invoke spiritual power from unseen forces ties Moses' magical teachings directly to African diaspora practices. In Obeah, a system of spiritual practice found in Jamaica and parts of the Caribbean, Moses' grimoires again played a critical role. Obeah workers use rituals, charms, and incantations to summon divine forces and work magic. These techniques share striking parallels with the divine names and angelic seals Moses used to command the elements and protect his people. Just as Obeah practitioners manipulate spiritual forces for protection or revenge, Moses used his powers to protect and guide the Israelites. The same spiritual principles of commanding unseen forces run through these practices, linking them to the ancient magic found in Moses' secret books. The intertwining of Moses' mystical teachings with African diasporic traditions is nothing short of extraordinary. The books were not just about biblical teachings, they were tools of spiritual resistance, empowering the oppressed to connect with divine forces. These connections form the spiritual foundation of African diaspora religions, where divine intervention, protection, and spiritual mastery are not just theoretical, they are actively invoked. Moses' rituals, sacred names, and magical spells lived on in the hearts and hands of those who needed them most. The story of the 6th and 7th books of Moses is not just one of ancient rituals and forbidden magic. It is a living legacy, continuing to shape spiritual practices and beliefs in the modern world. The hidden powers encoded in these books, rituals, incantations, divine names, still resonate with those seeking to understand the spiritual forces that govern life, fate, and the unseen realms. What began as secret knowledge for those who dared to challenge the limits of faith has grown into a powerful force that spans continents, cultures, and centuries. Today, the legacy of Moses' mystical teachings can be seen in the spiritual practices of millions of people worldwide, especially in African-descended communities. From New Orleans to Cuba, from Brazil to Haiti, Moses' books have influenced and shaped modern Afro-diasporic religions such as Hoodoo, Santeria, Vodou, and Obeah. These spiritual systems, forged in the crucible of slavery and oppression, have become pathways to personal empowerment, healing, and spiritual resistance, channeling the very forces that Moses once commanded. What is especially compelling is how these modern practices continue to draw from Moses' use of rituals, sacred names, and symbols. Practitioners today still invoke divine names and powerful seals to command spiritual forces, protect themselves, and manifest their will in the world. The deep connection between African deities and the biblical mysticism of Moses remains ever present, even in the face of centuries of colonization, repression, and cultural suppression. The use of names, seals, and invocations in these practices is not simply a link to Moses but a continuation of an ancient tradition that spans continents and millennia. The remarkable connection between Moses and African deities suggests a deeper truth: spiritual knowledge transcends culture and religion. Whether one is invoking Ogun to wield the power of iron or Moses to summon the elements, the underlying principle is the same: the belief that through sacred rituals and divine knowledge, one can command the forces of nature, transform reality, and bridge the physical and spiritual worlds. As the world becomes more interconnected, there is a growing recognition of these spiritual legacies. The practice of African traditional religions, once hidden in the shadows, now flourishes openly, reclaiming power and knowledge long buried. The lessons of Moses, whether in the form of his magical books or his divine connection to God, continue to inspire spiritual seekers and practitioners to reach for the divine, to connect with the hidden forces of the universe, and to unlock their own spiritual power. Ultimately, the story of the 6th and 7th books of Moses is not just about biblical history or African traditions. It is a story of spiritual liberation, the struggle to access divine power, assert spiritual agency, and connect with the ancestral forces that have guided humanity for millennia. Whether through the ancient rituals of Moses or the invocation of African gods, the message is clear: spiritual power is a birthright, available to all who seek it. The legacy of Moses and the African deities continues to shape our world, inspiring a new generation to explore the boundaries of the unseen and to claim their place in the realm of the divine. The 6th and 7th books of Moses reveal more than ancient secrets; they uncover a hidden bridge between biblical mysticism and African spiritual traditions. From sacred names to powerful rituals, the influence of Moses' teachings resonates across continents and centuries, woven into the practices of African deities and the diasporic religions of today. This is a story of hidden knowledge, spiritual mastery, and ancestral power, a reminder that the forces of the unseen have always been accessible to those who dare to seek them. By exploring these connections, we gain a deeper understanding of how spirituality transcends culture, time, and geography. Moses' sacred books and African deities are not distant relics; they are living legacies that continue to guide, protect, and empower those who honor them. Their lessons challenge us to reclaim lost knowledge, connect with our ancestors, and awaken the hidden potential within ourselves. This journey through the mystical, the sacred, and the hidden shows that the boundaries between religions and cultures are far thinner than we think. Whether in the deserts of the Middle East or the forests of Africa, the pursuit of spiritual power follows a universal path, one of reverence, ritual, and understanding the forces beyond the physical world. The story doesn't end here. The ancient secrets of Moses and the African deities continue to inspire and influence modern spirituality, inviting us to explore, question, and awaken our own connection to the divine. The spiritual world is vast, mysterious, and waiting for those bold enough to seek it. If you found this journey into hidden knowledge fascinating, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with friends who crave the mystical, and subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping explorations of history, spirituality, and the unseen world. Your next adventure into the secrets of the universe starts here. Hit that subscribe button and join us.